What is up, ladies and gentlemen? So I'm going to be reviewing today one of my favorite films, and that is going to be Twister. So if you see that in the background of this video, that is why I am talking about that. The movie stars Helen Hunt, Bill Paxton, Philip Seymour Hoffman, as well as Alan Ruck, who's in Ferris Bueller's Day Off. The movie is directed by Roger Donaldson, I think is the name. This movie is one of my favorite films of all time, not just because of the fact that this deals with a lot of the tornado subject, which is something that I got really into as a kid. I kind of wanted, as my second career phase, to possibly be a storm chaser, but I didn't want to have to deal with all of the facts that I could possibly die in that situation. So, I thought filmmaking was another aspect that I was really into. So I chose that route instead. But this movie kind of, if you're into sort of storms and stuff, this movie's definitely one of those films that you should check out because even to this day, I don't think half the movies that come out kind of hold the candle to what the visual effects of this look like. Even the tornadoes themselves look way better than some of the stuff that I've seen recently, such as like Geostorm and The Day After Tomorrow and things like that. Which I like all those disaster movies. I'm kind of a big disaster movie fan. It's just that this movie seems to hold up really well when it comes to visual effects, and that's because the visual effects team did an amazing job kind of blending the real life with what was going on set, and I think that really added a lot to it. Interesting enough that here in Minnesota, I heard a story that after a screening of Twister, there was actually a real life tornado after one of the screenings of the film, which was kind of eerie and scary. I was not old enough to be able to experience Twister in the theaters, but I did watch it a lot on VHS. And it's a movie that kind of sparked my interest in kind of extreme weather and stuff like that. So the movie kind of takes place. It's about kind of a couple that is dealing with some, emotional issues. You got Bill Paxton, who's kind of separated from his ex-wife, and he goes to get the divorce papers kind of settled so that he can move on to a new relationship. This movie is more or less a movie about sort of an individual, a man that is struggling with his relationship with his significant other, and they eventually kind of get back together through these instances of great peril as well as some interesting action sequences. One of the things that I didn't like about this movie was the annoying sort of counselor lady. She seemed a little bit out of place within this whole action movie. She was always the annoying person. I guess they were trying to go for the person that you were trying to relate to because you were not familiar with these sort of weather patterns, or you didn't really have that much experience with storm chasing. That is one thing I didn't really dig. I didn't think her character should have been in this movie. Just it kind of annoyed me, but luckily she's not in it for the later half of the film, so it gets a little bit better once that character is kind of taken away. The two relationships, Helen Hunt and Bill Paxton. Bill Paxton's kind of cut off from that whole thing. He doesn't like dealing with commitment and everything, which Helen Hunt later points out in the middle half of the movie. And they go through a lot of stages of arguments back and forth about their past and stuff that you kind of unravel over time. I don't really want to reveal too much, just because I know that there's some people that probably have never seen this movie, and if you haven't seen this movie, you definitely should. I highly recommend it to anybody that's thinking about seeing this movie. Maybe if it's on Netflix at some point, you should check it out. But I got the movie recently for pretty dirt cheap on Blu-ray, and I think you can pretty much find it pretty cheap online. So if you're looking for sort of that action movie that has a little bit of drama in it, as well as some cool sequences, one of my favorite sequences in the film is when they go through the building and then they come out the other end of the building as it's kind of like falling down, or the house, and it's falling down around them, and you kind of go through sort of like the different stages of a family room and things like that, and then even a bedroom, and come out the other end, and there's windmills crashing against the roadway and stuff flying at you, and then a big giant semi comes crashing down and explodes and stuff, and it's just a lot of fun. This movie is really cool, and the visual effects, like I said before, hold up to this day. There's a lot of visual effects that come out that don't kind of hold the candle, kind of like with the recent movie Hurricane Heights that I'd like to eventually review at some point in time. Now, this movie's been out for a while, so hopefully you guys have seen it. If not, tune out for this part. But basically what happens in the end of the movie is one of the main bad guys gets impaled by a giant sort of like telephone tower, and gets caught up in the twister and then explodes in the ground and everything. It's this really cool sequence where you finally see the bad guy get his just dues for being kind of a dick to the entire team. and that's another thing I'll get to later on. But it kind of goes through like if you don't know anything about tornadoes, it goes through the EF1, 2s, and 3s, and 4s, and eventually goes to an EF5, which is pretty much the closing climax storm of this film, and it's pretty impressive. It pretty much takes up like half of the field, including a roadway. And when you're seeing this thing, you're just like, holy crap, this thing is a monster storm, and that's elevated by the fact that there's visual effects of sort of a lion kind of growling, intermixed with wind and stuff, which is what they added later. The behind the scenes, if you get the Blu-ray, is pretty interesting to check out because they go through pretty much the making of this film, and you kind of see sort of how they kind of did the visual effects and stuff, which is the reason why I buy Blu-rays anyways, just to figure out the behind the scenes of that stuff. Yeah, it's pretty much about the good guys, which is Helen Hunt's team and Bill Paxton's team. Rest in peace, Bill Paxton. Bill Paxton's been away. He comes back to kind of get the divorce papers situated so that he can finally have a new relationship. Then they get kind of caught up in the whole storm chasing thing again, and Bill Paxton starts getting back into the unit that he was with previously before he became sort of a full-time weatherman, which they kind of make fun of throughout most of the movie. And there's some pretty cool sequences in this movie, like I mentioned before. It's like going through the building and stuff towards the end of the film. There's a sequence where they lift some like tractor equipment and stuff in the air. A tornado lifts that and just slams it down, and they have to kind of maneuver their way through that. There's an instance where like a giant semi-truck comes plowing through a building and stuff when they're hiding during the whole Shining scene in the film, which is another scary moment that had me kind of going. One of the coolest parts happens towards the end where they're kind of going through a cornfield in the truck, and they have to take Dorothy, which is this sort of storm detector thing, and it shoots out these sensors which kind of can detect the tornadoes and stuff, which is a cool futuristic plot that isn't really realistic in any means, but they're going through the fields and they have to dive out like at the last second and let the truck kind of just go right through the tornado so that they can intercept it. Another one thing that I kind of had an issue with this movie is that all the villains' vehicles are kind of black. The hero cars all have different personalities, different colors and stuff, while the villain cars kind of stick to the tone of black. And it's kind of obvious. It's like, couldn't do anything where you have some villain cars maybe have like muscle cars or SUVs or vans that have different colors and stuff to kind of match like their own unit that they're going in to try and intercept as well, because they've also created a Dorothy-like system where they can kind of track the tornadoes and stuff like that. That's one thing that in this movie I wish they had done a little bit differently, was they would have distinguished the two a little bit different and made it feel a little bit more real. But other than that, this movie is fantastic. I really love this movie. So again, if you're thinking about seeing this movie, I would highly suggest watching this movie. It's definitely a fun ride. I really enjoyed it as a kid. I watched it nonstop like I did at most of the movies that I was really into, like Jurassic Park, King Kong, Indiana Jones, things like that. Like, I like really, really good movies like that kind of take you on a journey and kind of show you something a little bit different than you're kind of used to in your average everyday life. So if you're looking for a cool movie like that to watch, I would definitely suggest that. So hope you guys learned a little bit of something in this review. I know I've been kind of not doing as much reviews as I usually do, but I've been trying to pump them out a little bit lately. Just so you guys have things to watch in this channel. So hope you guys rate, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.